Today's lesson is called Conversations with Your Kitty. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff.
My name is Roger, and today we're going to continue talking about how you can better communicate with your cat. Now, in 20 years, according to the Ministry of Science and Technology in Japan, we'll be able to better communicate with our cats using augmented reality and virtual reality, but that's still a ways off. It's still 20 years away. So we need some information right now on how to better communicate with our cats. And one way to do that is to look at their body language. Last time we talked about looking closely at the behavior of their ears and the behavior of their eyes. And if you know what they're indicating with their ears and their eyes, you should be able to better get along with your feline beast.
There you go. Ears and eyes. That's what we covered last time. Now, did we talk to our cats last time? Did we talk about making sounds? No, the closest that we came to was blinking. Apparently, if a cat blinks slowly, that means the cat trusts you, and you can communicate the same thing to that cat by blinking back slowly. At least that's what the author said. Do I buy it? Not really, but again, that's as close as we got to actually conversing with a cat last time. Anyways, we talked about the ears and the eyes last time. Next, let's go ahead and talk about the tail. Yes, we are focusing on body language, and we have to talk about the tail if we're talking about cats and body language. So let's go ahead and start doing that right after this.
Tail. A cat's tail that is pointing up and quivering is usually a sign of happiness or excitement. So if you've just returned home and your cat comes to you with this gesture, it means your furry friend is glad to see you. A cat with a tucked-in tail is probably scared and wants to make itself small. Cats also use their tail to give warning signs by flicking it repeatedly, a gesture that means they're agitated and want to be left alone.
大家好，第一部分我们看到单字 quiver， 这个字是动词，指颤抖、发抖。例如 Lucy quivered with fear when she heard a strange noise outside her window. Lucy 听到窗外有奇怪的声音，害怕的发抖。另外，补充一个相关片语 arrow in the quiver, A-R-R-O-W, arrow in the quiver 表示达成目标的策略或选择。这里的 quiver 是当名词，指箭筒、箭袋。举例来说 If this plan doesn't work, we still have a few more arrows in the quiver. 假如这个计划行不通，我们还有其他几个选择。接下来我们看到形容词 furry， 指毛茸茸的、富有毛皮的。例如 This furry caterpillar may look cute, but it's actually highly toxic. 这只毛茸茸的毛毛虫也许看起来很可爱，但其实含有剧毒。或是 We put a furry blanket on the floor for the old cat to lie on. 我们在地板上铺了一张毛茸茸的毯子给那只老猫躺。再来，我们看到单字 flick， 这个字是动词，指迅速摆动、轻弹、轻浮。像是 The little boy at the back seat stared curiously at the windscreen wipers flicking from side to side. 后座的小男孩好奇地盯着左右摇摆的雨刷。或是 Oliver flicked the small insect off his desk with his hand.Oliver 用手轻轻弹掉桌上的小虫。另外，除了上面的意思，这个字当名词时还可以指电影。举例来说 If you want to see a flick this weekend, there are many we can choose from. 这个周末你如果想要看电影，我们有很多选择。接着我们看到形容词 agitated， 指焦虑的、烦躁不安的。例如The bus driver became agitated when several young passengers began making too much noise.当几个年轻的乘客开始发出噪音，公车司机变得烦躁不安。另外，这个字去掉字尾 d， 就成了动词 agitate， 指搅动液体等、摇动。我们可以说 Don't agitate the fish bowl or you will harm the fish. 别摇动鱼缸，否则会伤到鱼。
Okay, now remember, everybody, cats have some unique features. They have some unique body parts. They've got paws like dogs do, but they have whiskers. Dogs have them too, but cats especially like to use their whiskers to get around and stuff like that. Those are the little pieces of hair on their faces. They're actually quite big. Those are whiskers. And then the other salient feature of a cat's body is its tail, okay? We like to see cats' tails, and we want to know what they do with those tails and how we can read the signals from those tails. So let's talk about tails here. So a cat's tail that is pointing up and quivering is usually a sign of happiness or excitement. Yes, I think I've seen that with the cat at our local restaurant. The owner there has a pet cat that she keeps in the restaurant. And yes, that cat does point its tail straight up in the air a lot of times, and it does kind of quiver. And to quiver just kind of means to vibrate kind of quickly back and forth.
There you go. So a cat's tail is pointing up. It's quivering. That's a good thing. Happiness or excitement. Okay, so if you've just returned home and your cat comes to you with this gesture, it means your furry friend is glad to see you. By the way, if something is furry, it is covered with fur. And yes, when we're talking about fur, we're talking about animal hair, usually that animal hair that covers most of the body of that particular animal. Yeah, we have hair on the top of our head, let's say, or on the top of our heads, I should say. That's not fur, okay? A cat, though, will have hair that covers its entire body. All of that hair on that animal is called fur, and yes, your cat is covered in fur, or you can say that this cat is your furry friend as long as that tail is straight up and quivering there. Sometimes the tail, though, can indicate other things besides just happiness or excitement.
Exactly. So, yeah, keep an eye out for that tail and see what it's doing here. And a cat with a tucked-in tail is probably scared and wants to make itself small. So, yes, they do all sorts of things with their tails. They don't really wag them like dogs do, but they will stick them straight up in the air, and then sometimes they will tuck those tails in. So a tucked-in tail is referring to a tail that is kept as close to the body as possible, almost to the point that you can't really see it.
There you go. Maybe if a cat is trying to attack or somehow dominate a situation, assert dominance over another cat, they might try to make themselves as big as possible, as scary as possible. Now, if they're afraid, the opposite is going to occur, okay? If they're being dominated by another cat, let's say, or if they're scared or afraid for some other reason, they're not going to try to make themselves big. They're going to try to make themselves small. So keep that in mind. If your cat's got that tail tucked in, it's probably scared or afraid. And there's more. Cats also use their tail to give warning signs by flicking it repeatedly, a gesture that means they're agitated and want to be left alone. So if you're agitated, you are a little bit grumpy, you're annoyed, you're irritated. Sometimes when I'm agitated, I'm like a cat here. I just want to be left alone. Please, I don't want to get angry at anyone, so just don't talk to me for a little while. I'm currently agitated. When I relax and feel better, I'll come back and talk to everyone. For now, though, I'm like a cat. I want to be left alone.
Yep, cats will indicate that by flicking their tails back and forth quickly. To flick just means to move something quickly, like to flick your wrist or to flick a switch, for example. And that means they are agitated, as you said. They're bothered about something, and yes, leave them alone or else they might let you have it. They might scratch you in the face. Leave that cat alone. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson. Let's go on now and talk about the whole body of the cat.
Body. What about when cats roll on the ground belly up? Generally, this is considered a sign that they're feeling relaxed and trusting. After all, they're exposing a very vulnerable part of their body to you. But cats normally don't like to be rubbed on their tummies. If you do so, you may be rewarded with a scratch.
第二部分我们看到单字 scratch 这个字是名词，指抓痕、刮痕。例如 I always put my glasses in a case so they don't get any scratches. 我总是将眼镜放在盒子里，以免产生刮痕。另外，这个字也可以当动词，指抓、刮，像是 Glenda's cat scratched the boy when he tried to grab its tail. Glenda 的猫在那个男孩想要抓他尾巴时抓伤他。
Okay, we've covered ears, eyes, and then also the tail. We've been talking about body language when it comes to cats. Now, let's talk about the body itself as well. What about when cats roll on the ground belly up? Yeah, what does this mean?
Yeah, I've seen cats do that every once in a while. They just kind of lie on their back and they kind of move around and then they have their belly facing up.
Like a dog, and usually dogs like to have their bellies rubbed. I bet cats are the same way too.
Yep, every time I pet a dog, at least, you pet him on the head and maybe on the back a little bit, and pretty soon the dog sits down and then rolls over because it wants you to scratch its tummy. But cats don't really do that. Cats hate that. When I was a kid, we had a cat. His name was Chester, and I used to do that just to make him angry. I would start rubbing his tummy. Of course, I wore a thick glove so he wouldn't scratch me, but he hated that. But in any case, they usually don't like that. But why would a cat do that? Generally, this is considered a sign that they're feeling relaxed and trusting. After all, they're exposing a very vulnerable part of their body to you. So after all, in the end, it is true that they are exposing this part of their body that is vulnerable. So here, let's talk about the verb to expose first. That just means to show something in the open that could be dangerous and someone might attack you. We often talk about, in photography, exposing the negative or exposing the sensor to light so it can get a picture, or exposing yourself to the sun if you want to get a suntan. That's not a good idea nowadays with skin cancer rates really high. But in any case, in this situation, they are showing or exposing their underside, their belly, and that's vulnerable. Why would they do that? Vulnerable means easy to be attacked.
Yes, if you are vulnerable, okay, you're sensitive in some way, shape, or form, or yes, you're open to attack. So sometimes if people sense that you're vulnerable, they might take advantage of that. They might pounce on that weakness of yours or that sensitivity of yours. And as far as cats are concerned, that underside, that belly of theirs, it's a vulnerable part of their body. So if they show that to you, that means that they trust you. Okay, I could be attacked here. This is my soft spot. So I trust you. So I'm exposing this to you, showing it to you. All right. But are they like dogs in that dogs like to have their bellies rubbed? No. Okay, Roger mentioned this before. Cats, unlike dogs, do not like to have their tummies rubbed. It says here, but cats normally don't like to be rubbed on their tummies. Are there exceptions to this rule? Sure, but for the most part, if you want to get scratched, go ahead and rub that cat on its belly. So if that cat rolls over, shows you its tummy, shows you its belly, if they're exposing this to you, that means they trust you, but they're not inviting you to give them a tummy rub.
Yes, ask their permission first. And if you do so, you may be rewarded with a scratch. Yes, that might be what they do to you if you try to rub them on the tummy. Although cats tend to like being scratched on the back because they can't reach that place themselves, but don't try that on their tummies. They will get very angry at you, usually.
Now here we also have the verb reward to talk about. If someone rewards you with something, they give you something because you've done something usually good. Here we're kind of being ironic, though. This cat isn't going to reward you with something good, okay? If you rub its belly, that cat's not going to like it, and they're going to give you a scratch, or they're going to reward you with a scratch. That's what you get there, pal, for rubbing my tummy. I don't like that one bit, so there's a scratch for you. That's your reward from touching me in that vulnerable area that I just exposed to you, not because I wanted you to rub me, but because I trusted you and felt relaxed around you. Well, buddy, that's all over now. Here's a scratch. I'm gonna take my claws and gouge into you deep.
And remember, cats have very sharp claws if they're allowed to sharpen them on a scratching post or on your sofa. So be careful there. Those scratches might draw a lot of blood. Okay, let's move on now to the third and final part of our lesson for today. Let's listen first.
Of course, context is important. Your kitty's body language will make more sense when you know what is happening at the time. Over time, you'll get better at understanding what your cat is expressing. And until technology catches up with us and we have an AR/VR pet interpreter, we'll just have to learn cat speak the hard way.
最后第三部分，我们看到片语 catch up with， 指追上、跟上。我们可以说 Roy left 10 minutes ago, but you might catch up with him if you take the scooter. Roy 10分钟前离开了，但如果你骑机车，也许可以追上他。另外，除了上面的意思，这个片语还可以指采访某人、与某人见面。例如 A reporter caught up with the singer in her studio in LA. 一位记者在这位女歌手洛杉矶的录音室采访到她。
Okay, let's wrap things up. Our article on cat body language is almost in the books. Now, remember all of the things that we have taught you over the last couple of days about ears and eyes and tails and bodies when it comes to cats. But also remember this, of course, context is important. Very often, the situation surrounding something can tell you a whole lot more about that particular thing. Like when you're reading an English book, maybe you come across a complicated word that you don't understand. The words surrounding it might help you to understand that word. Those words and the situation where that word comes up, that's the context in which it comes up.
Yep, the context. And in this particular case, we're talking about the general situation that the cat is in, the context. Are we outside? Is the cat agitated because there's a strange cat nearby? Or are we safely inside the house? Is it morning? Is it in the evening? Is it in the winter? Because cats get really cold in the winter. So yeah, we need to know all about the general situation, the context. It is important. Your kitty's body language will make more sense when you know what is happening at the time. And here we've got the phrase to make sense. Okay, so yeah, if something makes sense, it's logical, it's reasonable, it's not silly or weird. So yeah, it will make sense. It will be understandable when you know what is happening at that very time, and then you can make sense out of the cat's body language.
Okay, so maybe someone doesn't understand why you did something. Then maybe you explain your motivations, and that person will say, oh, that makes sense. That's reasonable. That's logical. I now understand why you did that particular thing. What you did wasn't irrational or crazy or nuts. Oh, that now makes sense. Thank you for explaining it to me. Anyways, over time, you'll get better at understanding what your cat is expressing. So you'll look for these things, and you'll also know your cat. You'll be sensitive to context, and soon it'll be like you're conversing with your cat. Now, I don't know how high a level your conversation can get to, but hey, something is better than nothing.
So, and until technology catches up with us and we have an AR or VR pet interpreter, we'll just have to learn cat speak the hard way. So yeah, we need to wait at least 20 years for AR and VR to become a reality. We want that technology to catch up with us. That's a phrase here. To catch up with means you're behind somebody and then you get yourself to the same level as that other person or thing. So if you're in a race, for example, like a marathon or something, and your rival is about 100 or 200 meters ahead of you, you work a little harder so that you can catch up to that person and then beat them at the finish line.
Yeah, you want to catch up, okay? Get even with them and then even pass them, overtake them. But here we're talking about technology right now. The technology isn't quite there yet. Maybe one day AR, VR, it'll help us to understand our pets better, but the technology is not there yet. It needs to catch up. By the way, an interpreter and a translator are very similar, but usually a translator, let's say, will take one language and turn it into another language. Whereas an interpreter, you might take a language or something else that's hard to understand and you make sense of that thing for someone else.
Indeed. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. It's time now to listen to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny， 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分提到，猫咪在地上打滚，肚子朝上，这被认为是猫咪感到放松和信任的动作。After all, they're exposing a very vulnerable part of their body to you. 毕竟他们向你露出了非常脆弱的身体部位。好，那这边有一个动词是 expose， 它表示使暴露、使接触或是使遭受怎么样。那么 expose A to B 就可以表达使 A 暴露在 B 之中。我们顺便来学这个字的字首字根。好 P-O-S-E pose 当名词它有姿势、姿态的意思。那么它当字根则是有 put 或是 place 的意思，也就是放置、摆放。好，那么在 expose 这个字当中 EX 表示向外， POSE 表示摆放。我们向外摆放、对外展示，应该很容易就联想到 expose 有使什么暴露或者是揭露什么什么的意思吧。这边再补充几个有相同字根的单字。第一个 dispose， 好，它的字首 DIS 表示分开， POSE 表示摆放，把事物分开摆放，应该不难联想到 dispose 它有整理、安排、处置的意思。第二个补充的是 compose， 它的字首 COM 表示一起， POSE 表示放置。那同学们可以试着想，把不同的事物、不同的元素放置在一起，放在一起构成整体，应该就不难联想到 compose 它有组成、构成的意思吧。好，第三个补充的是 propose， 好，它的字首 PRO 表示在什么什么之前， POSE 表示放置。那同学们可以试着联想，当我们把想法、计划提出来摆在前面，那就有提议、建议的意思咯。好，另外课文里面它用到片语 after all， 它其实有两个用法，我们来复习一下。第一个呢 after all 是用来说明理由或是提出解释，就相当于中文的毕竟。就像课文里面它用 after all 怎么样怎么样来加以解释，说为什么猫咪在地上打滚，肚子朝上被认为是感到放松和信任的动作。好，我们来造个例句。I think you should apologize to her.After all, she's your best friend. 我认为你应该向她道歉，毕竟她是你最要好的朋友。好，第二个 after all 可以用来表达结果跟先前的认知不一样，就相当于中文的终究还是。例如 He didn't have the courage to try bungee jumping after all. 他终究还是没有勇气去尝试高空弹跳。好，那么以上今天重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Quiver. The little girl's lip started to quiver, and then she began to cry. Flick. The horse flicked its tail to get rid of the flies. Expose. Bill took off his t-shirt, exposing his chest to the sun. Reward. If you study hard, you will be rewarded with good grades. Scratch. How did you get that scratch on your knee? Context. You need to understand the historical context before reading the novel. Interpreter. The two politicians communicated through an interpreter.
Discussion Starter starts now!
And now it's time for our discussion starter. Hey, Roger, do you like the idea of communicating with your pet using augmented reality technology? Why or why not?
I don't like the idea of using technology to communicate with pets because a lot of times people think that better communication will solve all our problems. All we have to do is sit down and talk about things and everything will be all right. No, that's not the case. I think some cats are friendly and very nice and you don't need to improve your communication with such beasts. But some cats are just rotten to the core. No amount of communication is going to change that relationship. Kick them out of the house. How about you?
I, on the other hand, would like to communicate with my pet using technology because my pet cat back in the day, I really had no idea what this cat wanted. It was nuts. It was crazy. It was acting insane half the time. So it would have been nice to be able to get to the bottom of what was going on in my cat's head. Okay, everyone. With that, today's article is now complete. But, as always, we sure hope that you guys have enjoyed reading along with us. Anyways, I'm Jeff.
I am Roger.
See you next time.